Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the AI Readiness, a boardroom briefing. I'm Chris. I am the CISO for Mercury IT, and I'm joined today by Martin. Martin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Morning. Yes, so I'm the General Manager and Head of Cybersecurity for Mercury IT, and been doing a lot of governance and compliance sort of roles over many years. So bring a bit of a perspective of governance and compliance to the conversation around technology.
Absolutely. And my background is mostly in cybersecurity over the last 25 years. I kind of started to get involved in the AI space probably around 2019. So 5 or 6 years. Was firstly around machine learning, and then moved on to other projects, and then large language models like chats, etc., came out as well. So we kind of get involved in that. So the reason why we've kind of kicked this sort of briefing off was mostly a call from a number of clients. So what we found is boards, directors, company owners were kind of coming to us and going, hey, how do we actually deal with this? We've read a lot in the news. We've seen stuff pop up, and exactly what should we be doing? What are the director duties involved, etc. Now, I'm sure you can all agree, looking at AI is kind of interesting. It's happening so quickly. I've been in the industry for a very long time, and nothing's moved this quick before. So looking at mobile tech, even the advent of the internet and the dot-com bubble and all those sort of things, nothing compares to the speed at which we need to keep up as directors and managers and etc. of AI. It kind of just feels like a flat out every 3 or 4 days, there's something new to keep up with and something new to deal with. So that is what we want to talk about, is a little bit of that challenge. What the challenge is, what are the numbers that we're seeing in some of the studies over the last, let's say over the last year or so are important. We need to talk about a governance piece, all right? So talking about from the top down, but we will also keep it practical. This is not just going to be a governance for show type situation, as Martin will tell us as well.
Yeah, so look, we do want to provide a bit of practical and pragmatic experience around all of this as well. So that's why there's going to be a few different tools that you'll be able to get from this particular briefing, and we'll actually give you the actual tools, so you'll be able to take those away and use them in your own businesses. So that's kind of what we're doing. This is really around an education piece, and by all means, this is not going to be the last time we're talking about this, because it is moving so quickly. A lot of what we're going to be talking about is basically just Chris and I are going to have a bit of a conversation around what we're doing and where this is all going, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to deliver for you is kind of the starting point. It's the part where you begin the conversation and your journey down AI. It's not going to be the end point, that's for sure. It's going to be a long journey.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about direct experience as well, which is why we wanted to bring this up. At the end of the day, what we are seeing is your staff are using it. End of story. So that becomes a cybersecurity challenge immediately. So we need to address that. And there's kind of a long story and a short story to that, and we'll keep it brief in what we can do. And what we're also seeing is where I was talking about the directors going, what do we do? Do we start, etc.? And it's really, really interesting, because there's two sides to the spectrum here completely. We have some companies that are basically paralyzed by the risk side of things, so they just don't move. And then you've got the other side that are kind of racing off without guardrails. So, and that's kind of important as well. And it comes down to, I suppose, the board, sometimes the CEO I've seen as well. So it depends. And if you are a listed company, sometimes the shareholders are going, Why have we not started? Why have we not looked at this? What's going on? And they kind of feel like we're going to be left in the dust. Now, Martin did talk about the actual tools that we would send to you. It's basically a couple of documents just to get you thinking and start working towards it. It's not prescriptive as such. It's a case of like, here's a couple of steps that you could think about around risk, a kind of a 90-day plan, an AI policy, things like that. So what we will be doing is we'll be reaching out to you after this event, and we'll send those documents to you as well. Now, Martin, there's a couple of percentage numbers here that have come up from the Harvard Business Review over the last year or so. I was wondering if you wanted to speak to some of these numbers.
Well, and I guess I think some of these numbers are probably not a surprise to anyone that's on today, because we all think we're going to be left behind when new technology comes along, and that's kind of why there's 83% of people are saying that if we're not embracing the new technology, we're all going to be left behind. And the fact is, it's already becoming a strategic priority for a lot of businesses, but a lot of people don't even know where to start on how you do that. It's a priority, but where do you start with it? And that 48% feel their organization is ready. I would probably say that's more at the top end of town. Certainly in the small to medium businesses, I don't think it's anywhere near that high as being a percentage of people who think that their organization is ready, because in that smaller space, it's always a lot harder to deliver the same level of strategic imperatives as a big business when you've got less time, for one, because you're working in the business usually, and also you've got less resources to actually assist you to do that. So I think that there's a few of those numbers there are not really surprising, and the window for competitive advantage is closing, and it does, because if your competitors are embracing AI and they're using it to gain leverage in the marketplace or improvements in their efficiency, that does leave you behind at the end of the day. So it is not really a surprise. I don't think anyone's going to go, oh, well, those numbers look a little bit out. That looks about right. And I would say that where we're going now is trying to bring those numbers down to say that we're not going to be left behind and that we are going to be ready.
Absolutely. I think that's the interesting paradox that we're seeing here, is that we've got, above an 80% going that we're going to be left behind if we don't take it on, but then only approximately half saying they're ready. And yes, I agree with you, Martin. In my experience, most business, I'd be surprised if it's above 30% that actually feel like they're ready to move on AI. So it's definitely, I do feel like it's a board kind of decision. It's the time for the board to actually make the choice and get the governance right to actually capture the value and not make those mistakes, which we will talk about next. It's a nice little segue into this next slide. And what we talk about here is around the reality of a proof of concept. So there's probably a few of us on this call actually that have these proof of concepts or proof of value if you're working with a vendor or a pilot program running. And quite often this is kind of incubator stage, it's getting an idea. It's running up that idea and testing it with a small group of users. Quite often this happens within IT realms, and quite often those pilots or proof of concepts are relatively successful. Now, the interesting thing is that there is an MIT study. You'll see the very, very first point going 95% of these proof of concepts are actually failing. So that means there's only a 5%, acceptance into bottom line results. So this is important, and we've got to remember that a proof of concept success doesn't always translate into productivity. And there's a couple of things there that we need to look at. So one of them is around success criteria. And I think that's probably the biggest one that we seem to be missing. It's kind of quite often it's seen as the new shiny object, and somebody has an idea and they spin up this little thing and then they show a few people and it looks amazing, right? But there's no measurement going forward. So how do we know it's successful? So there's definitely a gap between where we are experimenting within our business versus the actual tangible outcomes of that situation. Now, I'll give you a little bit about my experience, because I have built a few of these, whether it's agentic applications, etc., running forward, and what that actually looks like. The first thing is actually the scope. The scope has got to be very, very defined. And that's why I said the governance and the success criteria, etc., has got to be in place. And you can't actually just run off into the hills with this. So when you do the scope, make it as narrow as possible. Start there at least. So find something, a problem or a task that's taking a lot of time that can actually free up staff time. So see whether we can actually get a 20% improvement or whatever it is, put numbers against it, measure it, test it. You can always scale beyond that if that part is working, right? Don't know if you've seen the same sort of thing, Martin.
Yeah, and I think one of the key takeaways for this is that a lot of the organizations that are coming out and saying, hey, we'll help you get an AI component into your business, they're also learning on the job because it's so new for them as well. So we don't know what we don't know. You know, that old saying does actually really apply here, because we don't know what we can do with AI at the end of the day. We're trying to find things that it might work with, and that's kind of where we're looking for it, is starting small, look for those couple of things that we know it can do, and looking for a partner who can actually help them deliver that. Because at this stage in this sort of journey of the AI, we really don't have all of the answers. We just don't. We don't know what it's going to be able to do tomorrow, because it's developing so quickly. So getting something in place now that works, rather than 95% of them not working, is a good place to start that journey.
And I'd like to add another tip onto that as well, is, the businesses that are winning at this are, it's not just about innovation theater here. What we're talking about is that old adage, fail fast. Is what we need to do. So you need to be running that proof of concept up, and as soon as it's not meeting the criteria with some tweaks, kill it and move to the next one quickly. So you'll find a lot of businesses. I don't know if anybody follows like Steve Bartlett and that in Flight Story. He's got a head of failure and innovation. Right. And she's literally tasked with the number of failures that they can get through to innovate faster. So an interesting concept, and it certainly does work in this instance. Right. And then that comes up to challenges for directors. Now, I will definitely hand over to you, Martin, from a governance perspective.
So I think this is where we kind of want to add a real value to this conversation today, because if we're not having these conversations at the board level, we are well and truly behind already. Because what's happening is, as Chris mentioned right at the beginning of the conversation, is that if we haven't got anything in place now, what we do know is that staff are already using AI. And the big problem for us in the cybersecurity IT space is, if you're not controlling the use of that technology, or you don't have any visibility of that technology, things can go bad very quickly. And we'll get into more of those kind of scenarios around what that means, but we'll bring in the whole concept around PII, personally identifiable information, and how people are using in your business the AI that they have access to. Because what we do want to point out, that there are differences between free AI, which there are so many free AI tools out there today, and everyone's probably played with it a little bit. So all of your Copilot, the free Copilot, there's free ChatGPT, all of these free tools are out there, and people are using them even just for searching online. But they do have different security controls to the paid versions of those same products. So the paid version of ChatGPT and the paid version of Copilot have far more guardrails around the use and sharing of that information, and even to the point of how the AI learns is a lot more controlled in those spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So did you want to touch on that, Chris?
Well, I was going to say what we could do is people may have some questions on that at the end as well around the actual technology that we've seen and what's maybe better or not. This conversation's not specifically around the technology. It is aimed at a governance area. However, the technology is important and certainly affects the cybersecurity. So it is something to be said. From a director's perspective, though, and looking at risk, something that you've got to be aware of is that, you know, the AI risk kind of reshapes all your risk categories. So this is not just adding like AI onto your risk register. It's not as simple as that. This is going back to your risk committee if you have one, etc., and asking very strategic questions around how does AI shift our strategic risk, our operational risk, our reputational risk, financial risk. That is something very important to understand. Is AI is so broad, it's being used across departments. This is not just affecting, you know, your marketing team because they want content creation. This is affecting the financial team doing projections of spreadsheets and using AI to speed that up. So it sits and it touches everything. So if you look at the AICD's AI governance side of things, so they've got a particular document, and I do recommend that you go and read that. They've got some case studies in there, and one of the case studies is around Telstra. Telstra kind of pushed their AI board into existence and around risk management back in 2019. So, you know, they've been on it and managing it the whole way, actually meeting fortnightly to make decisions, and then obviously ramp that up to a board level reporting twice a year around those risks.
Yeah, exactly. And that is important to note, that those requirements for board members around accountability, you are accountable for this even if you don't know it's being used.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was going to mention, as the slide talks about here with regards to duties and regulations. Now, although Australia does not have AI regulation as such yet, it does have some areas that you can go and read that they've put in place, like your AI bits around risk. And again, the AICD has got a good document on this. Also, if you are involved in this and interested in what's actually taking place, looking at other countries' AI laws is not a bad idea as well. At the end of the day, Australia does look at other side of the world, like the UK, as an example. And the UK does have what they refer to as algorithmic impact assessment templates that businesses have to do for EU regulation laws. So looking at that, I would kind of expect that Australia will do the same. If you are in the health industry, there are specific pieces of legislation around that already, around the, if you're designing anything around the health aspect, and there is AI, and it's talking about, at the end of the day, it's a duty of care for directors. So it does extend, you know, all your standard duty of care and your existing laws. AI touches all of that as well. You know, you can't get to a point whereby there's harm caused somewhere and you're standing in a court of law going, well, we didn't know that the AI would make that decision. It's not going to be good enough.
No, and we do know that AI, as it stands right now, does do some weird things. So it does make weird recommendations, and at times it can pick up on things that we wouldn't even expect, like racist slants. And if you're relying on an AI chatbot, you need to make sure that it's not going to pull something weird out of the hat and put your reputation at risk because you didn't really have a lot of the guardrails around what it can do.
Absolutely. And what I say to a lot of customers that start having this conversation is, you don't want to be scrambling when the regulations do arrive. You actually want to lead with governance. So most of it's in place. So maybe it requires a tweak here or there, but we're actually running that race already. Now, that kind of leads us on to risk, because when we're talking about kind of board level, that's most of what we need to do. And I think this slide kind of depicts a good overview from a risk appetite. So the will and won't boundaries are super important. And what I would say here is to make it as clear as possible. Always keep human oversight there. Something I would mention when trying to make a decision around, does a human need to be in the loop with regards to the decision? Think of it like the way Amazon kind of holds these meetings. I don't know if anybody's read about this. They refer to it as the one-way door and two-way door, or door one, door two principle. Basically what it is it's a decision where it's a one-way door, means it's very difficult to back that decision out or reverse it. So think of something like an acquisition, right? It's very hard to back that out or wind that down. Versus a two-way door means it's easy to reverse the decision or step back out with no reputational harm, not much cost lost, etc. Think about it in exactly the same way. When you're getting AI to make a decision, right? Can we back that decision out easily, or is it going to affect someone? So example is I might get AI to make a decision about going and grabbing the best piece of information to help a staff member, but I'm not going to get AI to make a decision around disciplinary action in an HR capacity. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. It does sound obvious, but working through all those things and making sure and talking to the business units and how they're using it is going to be super, super important. And something that we are going to need to do in here is actually have an AI register. And what we mean by that is, and you'll see this kind of in the 90-day plan that we'll send out to you as well. And that is just a general plan. You don't have to follow it exactly. Every business is different. It's just to give you an idea. But having an actual AI register is super important. So where is it being used in the organization? How is it being used? And then from that, we can determine the risk around those areas. Now, this particular framework, the governance framework, you'll actually see this in the AICD's AI governance document. Again, I recommend that you go and read it. It's not terribly long and it's relatively easy to understand. And for each area, it will give you the questions that directors need to ask, right, to get a good understanding. But it will also give you amber and red lights. And these are basically think of them as red flags, I guess. So it's a case of like, if you don't have this in place, that is a red flag type situation. Or if you don't have this in place, that's an amber. It could be a risk. It depends on your business and whether there's PII involved, etc. So with these 8 elements, we're just going to run through some of them. If you want more information, like I said, AICD is the place to go. This is on page 6 as a general, 6 and 7, I think is a general overview. And then there's a more detailed explanation into each of these boxes. But of course, it all starts with the roles and responsibilities. So very, very clear AI accountability matrix is the first place to start. So very, very simple question: who on the board and who in management are ultimately responsible and take accountability for AI decisions? So that's decisions of the business. So what AI are we using and where it's being used? So
and we do need to point out that that's not an IT function as such.
Absolutely not. Please, yeah. Is definitely not an IT function. So and yeah, it is interesting, Martin, that you say that, because we'll have businesses coming to Mercury and going, okay, can you deal with this? Can you manage this? And it's got to be a partnership, to manage that. Absolutely. All righty. Organizational structures, Martin, do you want to maybe go over that one?
Well, I mean, this kind of goes into most of the board's subcommittee scenarios where you have got a risk subcommittee or a financial subcommittee already existing on your board. And what we're talking about here is having AI embedded into a steering committee so that you've got board oversight on those decisions that are going out from your operational team around what they're using AI for and how they're using it. So you can't turn around and say, well, we didn't know about it. Well, we all know that doesn't actually work on a board. You can't turn around and say, I didn't know about it. You've got to ask the right questions, and the AI steering committee is the place to do that, because it will give you a good structure for being able to have a real oversight on your internal AI practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martin, I'm sure you'll agree that like that, the AI steering committee, that function could be rolled up into existing structures and committees. So if you've got a risk committee, that's probably a good place to position it. You might need one or two different representation in there, but that could be a place to do it as well.
Exactly.
Now, around people and culture is super important as well. Like I said, your staff are actually using this already, whether it's on their phones or just on the computers into something free or paid for. And the thing that we need to do is make sure that we're getting the appropriate training across that organization. So making sure that we kind of moves into the next bit as well around the policies. So making sure you've got a very clear AI policy. What will we allow? What won't we allow? Make it clear, right? And make sure the staff have training across the board on what that actually looks like. If someone's trained in AI, you're going to get a much better outcome than if they are not. And that kind of moves into controls and assurance as well around technical elements. Now, this is where you can discuss with your IT department a bit more. How do we block what we don't want used is a good starting point, right? So talking about controls. Remember, just having the policy in place by itself without actually enacting any control or measurement or monitoring is not going to be good enough. It's kind of like an empty threat. It's also not going to hold up in court because you didn't do anything. It's not like, oh, I've created a policy, so therefore everybody will follow it. Doesn't quite work that way.
No, and that is one of the things that we do talk about, because the policy is really important. And that's why we are giving you something to start with as a policy. Make it your own, absolutely. But yeah, those controls are so important, because at the end of the day, staff will go around policies and things just to make their lives easier. So if AI right now is helping their day-to-day role, and then you turn around and block it, they're going to try and find a way around it. So we do need to understand what that means from a policy and getting staff to comply with that policy, and around what we're stopping. Because if we're going to stop all free versions of AI, and again, it's never going to be perfect, but if we have got controls that can block most of it, if we stop most of the free versions of AI, what are those staff members going to start doing? They might start trying to use their own phones. They'll try and use their own devices to try and get around your own internal compliance policies.
Absolutely. And moving on to data and infrastructure is super important. This is often where we as Mercury tend to get involved, because this starts getting down to structure of data. Where is it? Is it quality data? Because it's that usual rubbish in, rubbish out, and it's no different with AI, right? If we don't have decent data coming in, it's doomed to failure before it even starts. So we're definitely looking at classification of documents is super important. Who's got access to what? Because when we start looking at AI often runs on permissions of that user to access that data. So if there's a problem somewhere within the groups or permissions that you've set, AI is going to be able to retrieve data that it's not supposed to, right, and give access to someone that's not supposed to have that access. So now you start getting into a notifiable data breach type situation as well, where you've got people that shouldn't have access. So basically it's unauthorized access. And if it is into HR documents or something like that, then we've got PII at stake as well. So personally identifiable information. And then that does become a problem within legislation. Talking about stakeholder and society, this is an interesting one, and I think this is going to be it's a board discussion, and you're going to need to have a chat about it and how much transparency you give. When I speak to boards, I do normally say things along the lines of you need to be as transparent as possible. So if you are using AI to deliver some sort of output, you should be explaining that AI has been used. You might want to document your policy, the public facing one, so that the public, because they are also your stakeholders, needs to have an understanding there. Just think of it as a trust exercise, and you don't want to erode trust with your clients. So being transparent and open about how AI is used, where it's used, etc., is going to be very important. And I think monitoring and evaluation, Martin, I think we pretty much covered.
I think we have covered that.
I
think we've all gone over that at length now.
Yeah. So moving on to something that kind of drops a bit more into the cybersecurity realm is around shadow to sanctioned AI. And what we mean by this is we already said your organization and your users are using AI already. It's everywhere, it's ubiquitous. So what we need to do is move into sanctioned, monitored, controlled type of situation. And this kind of started touching on what you were talking about, Martin.
Yeah, and it does. And one of the things that I was talking to Chris earlier today actually about this is that if we do put a policy in place and say you can't use AI, and we put the controls in place to stop everyone using AI, and people start going outside of that onto their own devices, etc., or even you start driving staff to go, well, I don't want to work for this organization, I want to work for one where I can use AI. We do come to that point where is there a value proposition to do a paid corporate version of AI? And the reason we're talking about that is because the paid corporate versions like Copilot and ChatGPT, they have more controls from a security perspective. So it means that if there's personally identifiable information or corporate data, it doesn't get used as part of the learning model for that AI. In the free models, it does get used for that learning model. And so technically that data is used as part of the learning model. So there are parts of whatever has been uploaded. So if a staff member uploads a whole staff list or a whole client list to try and do some kind of analysis on it, that entire list's data, whilst it won't be in that particular file, that data will live in the large language model as part of its learnings.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely, we've definitely seen examples of those sorts of leaks as well. And if it's proprietary information, etc., from the business, that is going to be out there. So, part of this and part of that kind of 90-day plan that we talk about is this kind of amnesty period where it's basically going, look, I know we've been using AI, etc. We need to lock this down. No one's getting in trouble for anything, but I do want to get an understanding of what is used, what AI, where and how we are using it across the organization. Once we understand that, we can understand the risks, and then we can go and put in paid for models. And I think where we got to this as a decision, Martin, is it's quite a tough one because there's no way of doing this cheaply.
No,
there just isn't. There isn't a free tool that you can use that's going to protect the data. So you're going to need a paid for tool. And as soon as you've got a paid for tool, you're talking about what? Like licensing every single user? Because if you don't, what's going to happen to the users that don't have access to it? Generally, they're going to go around the policy. And that is a concern.
It is, and that's what we were talking about today is how as a business you can balance that risk versus reward of using the AI against the actual cost of those tools, because they do add up, especially across an entire organization. $30 to $50 a month per user is a real expense for a business. And what you'd want to see is a return on investment for that, because if you're going to pay for that, you'd want to see how are you going to see that level of return to make that value worthwhile.
Agreed. And that pretty much wraps up today. we've got some time left, about 10 minutes or so, where we can handle some questions if anybody's got any. But while we're waiting for any questions to pop up, like I said, we will be sending through a template policy. We'll send through like a template 90-day plan so you can see what that kind of looks like. Like I said, every organization is different, so please go through it carefully. You know, that is not to tell you how to run your business. It's just to give you an idea of what that would look like in our experience, where we've rolled this out to a number of clients. And we also have a risk matrix there for you as well. So again, just an idea. Your risk committee might be well more fair with risks than myself, but it will definitely give you a starting point.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, I think that's what we're waiting for. If anybody's got anything.
And you can just pop them into that Q&A section if you've got anything you'd like to know. If you don't feel like you want to post your question here, you can always, as Chris said, reach out to us afterwards, and we're happy to answer any of those questions as well.
No, absolutely. Go and follow us on LinkedIn, and you can find myself or Martin. Feel free to reach out directly and ask any questions that you have. Like I said, we will get our team to follow up with you via email and send you through those documents, or give you a link to those documents so that you've got access to it. If you do have any questions off the back of that, by all means, if you can reach out to us, that'd be awesome. And thank you everyone for your time.
Yeah, thank you.